Welcome to our presentation on reading strategies. Our learning outcomes today include reading actively and with purpose, utilizing SQ3R, which stands for Survey, Question, Read, Recite, and Review, and implementing strategies to make the most of time spent reading. First, we'll focus on techniques that contribute to effective reading. These include finding purpose, previewing the text, reading actively, and taking notes or annotating. Find purpose. This is important because your reason for reading will guide the way you read. Ask questions like, how will I be asked to use this information? Does this reading relate to an assignment or an exam? That will inform your reading techniques because you read differently when you know, for example, you will be writing an essay on the book you're reading. How will this text be utilized in class? Will you discuss certain aspects of it? Or does it provide context for new material you'll learn? How does this reading relate to the overall theme and purpose of the course? This shows you what you need to take from the reading. Does this text prepare you to perform a science experiment or complete a research project? Does it help you understand the course topic? Now that we've identified a purpose for reading, we are ready to preview the text. This is a kind of warm-up that you want to complete before diving in. Ask yourself questions like, what is communicated in the title and headings? This points to major themes and topics. How is the reading structured? This lets you know where you might find maybe a summary or a main idea. Is the reading organized in sections? If so, that'll make it even easier to find things like a conclusion or results if it's a scientific paper. And what about other elements of the text? You might notice, for example, a pull quote, in which one quote is really big and it's chosen because it emphasizes a point or is striking for some reason. Or you might notice that a graph illustrates a particular concept. You can see that the author or publisher has chosen to emphasize certain parts of the reading, and that can clue you in as to what's most important. Read actively, especially if you're used to reading for pleasure, flipping through a magazine, or scrolling through the internet. You might be tempted to zone out and read passively, just let the words wash over you. But it's important to be intentional about your assigned readings. You don't want to miss important points or concepts because you'll be asked to use that information later, whether in an assignment or on a test. So once you have your purpose and you've previewed your text, decide how best to read with your objective or purpose in mind. If you're learning a new technical concept, it's important to read every word. If you're reading a longer work, maybe a novel, you might read efficiently, but keep an eye out for details that could relate to bigger themes in the book. And if you're reading for particular information, it might be appropriate to skim for main ideas, then reread important passages. All right, so now that we're committed to active reading, we also want to be sure that we take notes, and this can take a couple of forms. Most important, read with a pen or pencil handy, as well as notepaper to jot down extra notes if necessary. Annotating or marking of the text is important because it keeps you engaged in the reading and gives you something to look back on. When you see that you highlighted something or wrote a note in the margin, you're going to remember what you were thinking and what you learned. Another option is to outline your reading on a sheet of paper. You know what works best for you, but what's important is that you have a record of your reading. And remember, taking notes or annotating is a means of staying actively engaged with the text and avoiding passive reading. Now we're going to look at a certain method for active reading. This is called SQ3R, and that stands for survey, question, read, recite, and review. The first step is survey. That means to preview the text, look at headings, structure, and so on. Next, ask questions about the content. These could be things like, what is the main idea? What is the most important concept? How does it work? You can also ask more specific questions like, what is the definition and importance of a term? And you could also try turning headings into questions. But aim to think of several questions. Third, read to understand the structure and find some preliminary answers to your questions. Fourth, recite, which means answer your questions. And finally, review the text, your notes, and the answers to your questions. Feel free to try this structure and see if it is useful for you or helps you remember how to stay engaged and active as you read. Now let's take a moment to reflect. Do you adjust your approach to reading depending on your purpose? If so, how? If not, how could you adjust? For the next part of the presentation, let's look at common concerns that come up regarding college reading. These include managing heavy reading loads, how fast you read, and how you might need to read differently for different subjects. If you're dealing with a heavy reading load, the first step is to evaluate your assigned reading and prioritize based on importance. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of each reading? Which of these purposes is the most significant and meaningful in terms of grades and goals? Next, strategize. Which of these readings must be read closely? Which can be skimmed or reduced to their most important parts? And finally, schedule amounts of time based on priority, difficulty, and so on for each reading assignment. Strive to follow that schedule because your time is limited and you need to focus on the reading that is the most crucial and beneficial for your schoolwork. Ideally, we can read everything, but sometimes we need to be strategic. Another common concern is reading speed. The most important thing to keep in mind when it comes to this is that reading with a purpose will help you stay focused and efficient. Another technique is to allow your eye to move forward, avoiding subvocalization. Oftentimes, we have a habit of saying the words aloud to ourselves in our head, but if you let that go and just let your eyes move across the page as quickly as you can comprehend the text, you will find that you read more quickly. And we can also focus on signposts in the reading. This is similar to previewing the text. Look for the table of contents, diagrams, important terms, first sentences of paragraphs, things that will help you focus on what's most important if you don't have time to read every word. Moving along to reading for different subjects. Now, different courses assign very different kinds of readings, so it follows that you'll want to adjust your reading techniques as needed. If you're reading something that's really dense with information, something that you're going to need to learn every step of, like math, you need to slow down and read every word. But there might be other kinds of readings, like when you're looking for context and putting together a research paper, you're searching for pertinent information, and you can really speed up and pinpoint the most necessary information. And just as you adjust your reading techniques, you can also adjust your note-taking or annotation style. For example, you might prepare for a history exam by plotting out a timeline, or you might underline main points if you know you're going to be writing a response paper giving your perspective on the author's argument. Now let's reflect. Which reading strategies are most useful for you and why? Which strategy discussed today would you like to try, and for which class? topics covered today include finding purpose, previewing the text, reading actively, and taking notes. We also went over the SQ3R reading method. That's survey, question, read, recite, and review. And we talked about how to manage a heavy reading load. We discussed reading speed and reading for different subjects. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our Works Cited. I'm Corey Robertson, Student Support Coordinator. Please reach out to the Student Success Center for additional support.